Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Hello, readers and fellow book lovers. Welcome to the second week of the Festival of Storytellers, which gives you a chance to see and interact with a wide variety of authors and their books. My name is Steve Sears. I am the author of In the Beginning, A Consideration of Genesis. My storytelling is about the story of Genesis. And part of the reason I wrote it is I wanted to tell the whole story, all 50 chapters. So my book ended up being 22 chapters to get it all in. So last Friday, I told you a little bit about Abraham and some of the stories that show you how he got along with his neighbors, because that's one of the signal parts of Genesis that we can all take today, is that even though he was an alien, he managed to live in peace with all his neighbors. Today, what I want to talk about is something you won't find in the Bible. When we first meet Abraham, it tells us that he lived in Ur, but then he moved when he was 75 to Canaan, the land of Canaan, the other side of the Jordan River, not as far up. He moves from Mesopotamia. He never goes back. And so in 2013, I took a Bible study. Good to see the chats. I understand if people have questions, I'm supposed to answer them. So I might interrupt myself. But anyway, back in 2013, I took a Bible study of Genesis. And when we got to Abraham, I once again saw this bit about him leaving Ur. And I was curious. So I went on the internet. I said, Abraham in Ur, what would come up? Well, what came up was this little excerpt from someone called Jacob Isaacs from a book called Our People. And it had a whole story about it. So I took it to the Bible study. I read it, really proud of myself for finding this. And Pastor Beth, our leader, said, "Oh, that's Midrash." And she kind of dismissed it. Midrash being an oral tradition that it comes out of the same written tradition from all those ancient Jewish scholars. But I was always curious about it. So when I did some research for my book, I found a lot more information about this story. And I felt it was indicative of the big question, which is why did Abraham leave Ur? It was a great civilization. That's where his family was. What motivated him to leave all of that behind? So to get to that story, I first have to go back to Noah. So when Noah is 600 years old, the flood happens. God has prepared him for that. Noah has believed him and made preparations. The flood happens. Noah and his family and all the creatures he takes are saved. The flood recedes. Noah, the ark comes aground, everybody comes out, they start their lives again. So Genesis tells us that when this happens, Noah plants a vineyard and he has some of the wine and he gets drunk and goes to sleep and he's naked. So he has 3 sons. He has Shem, Ham, and as soon as I can remember the other one, Shem, Ham, and where is he? Shem, Ham, and can't find his name. Japheth. There he is. Japheth. So he has the 3 sons. So he falls asleep. His son Ham finds him, goes and tells the other brothers. They're appalled. They carefully go in and make sure he's covered. When Noah wakes up, he's incensed and he blames Ham and he curses out Ham's son Canaan. And he basically says Canaan will be cursed and he will be a slave to the brothers Shem and Japheth. So Shem is the son that leads us to Abraham. Shem is the generations that go from Noah to Abraham, and Abraham's father Terah is a descendant. Oh, more chats, excellent. However, Ham's generation goes through goes in a different direction. So Ham is the father of Canaan. Canaan is the father of a man called Nimrod. And the Bible talks a little bit about Nimrod. Nimrod is said to be a great hunter before the Lord. Genesis says this twice. But what we find out about Nimrod is he's a great, powerful man, a great hunter, a great warrior, but he has no use for God. In fact, he actively opposes God. He blames God for the flood and holds it against God. And he puts himself higher than God because he's such a great figure. People are attracted to him. So he has his own religion, which is idol worship for things like the moon, fire, things like that. And there's physical idols that they use to represent them. So at the time when Abraham is about to be born, he's living in Ur, Ur, that's ruled by Nimrod. Nimrod is still alive. So how can this be? So in my book, what I do is I trace how old all the patriarchs are each time there's a generation going forward. So at the time that Abraham is born, most of the people all the way back to Noah are still alive. In fact, at the time Abraham's born, Shem is still 450. He's going to live another 150 years. He lives to be 600. And our fact said Shem's son is 350. He's going to live to be 438. And Shelah, Shelah, is 315. He will end up being 433. Shelah is he's in the same generation. So more questions, hold on. So Shelah is the same generation as Nimrod. Shelah is still alive. So it's certainly possible that Nimrod would have been alive and still active in his maturity at the time Abraham is born. Because you're running out. Question, because you're writing about something that most can be untaught about, did you feel pressure to cover most in a limited material? Actually, what I plan to do, and I say this in the book, all I wanted to do was write about everything that Genesis tells us. I don't worry about what other people thought about it. I feel like if you just read Genesis and read the details, you can come up with all these ideas about what's going on. Like the ages. Genesis gives you all the ages. All you have to do is figure them out and figure out how they line up. So here's the story. Abraham, right before Abraham's supposed to be born, the advisors and soothsayers for Nimrod tell him that they found that there's a baby that's about to be born that's going to be a great leader and potentially a threat to Nimrod. So they convince Nimrod that it's pretty likely. So what Nimrod does is he rounds up all the baby boys and has them slaughtered. This story should sound familiar because we see it other places in the Bible, don't we? So Terah, who is Nimrod's chief advisor, says, well, you're not going to make me do this. At first, Nimrod says, no. But the advisors say, the biggest signal for this is right over. That's a good question. I'll get back to that. So it's right. They say the best evidence for this is right over his house. So they demand that Terah give up his baby. Well, just so happens one of Terah's servants also has a baby boy. So they switch it. They give the other baby boy to Nimrod and his people to kill. And they hide Abraham in a cave. And while Abraham's in a cave, he comes to realize that the sun, the moon, fire, all these things don't explain how everything can be. And he comes up kind of independently with the idea of a one true God of all creation, which of course he's inherited from Adam and from Noah. It also, there's some of the sources say that he actually spent some time with Shem because he's hiding out from Nimrod, and Shem was still alive. So years go by. Abraham's now a young man. People have forgotten about this prophecy because apparently it's not true. Abraham he's living with his father, and there's some great stories about Abraham having conflict with this whole idea of these idols. And I'm going to read some of these from the Midrash because they give you an idea of how Abraham came into conflict. So Terah's business was the sale of idols, and Abraham did his best to convince people not to buy them. So it says, once upon a time, his father's away, so Abraham's in charge. So an impressive-looking, broad-shouldered man entered the store. Give me a big idol as befits my status. He pompously addressed the boy, Abram. Abram handed him the largest idol he could find on the shelves, and the man drew a substantial amount of money from his pocket. How old are you, Abram questioned. I am 50 years old. And Abram says, and you are not ashamed to worship a God that is only 1 day old? My father just made this one yesterday. Confused, the man left. An old woman entered. She told Abram that thieves had invaded her house during the previous night and stolen her gods. Abram says, is that so? If your gods were unable to protect themselves from the robbers, how did you expect them to protect you? You are right. But whom shall I serve? The creator of heaven and earth. So I'm not arguing that this actually happened, but this gives you a sense of the kind of conflicts Abraham would find himself in because of his belief and how it opposed the belief of Nimrod. So the story goes on that one day he goes to the temple while his father is out. Abraham takes something and destroys all the idols in the temple. His father goes to Nimrod, tells him. Nimrod questions Abraham. Abraham tells him about his God. Nimrod throws him in jail. They talk about fire. Nimrod says, well, there's nothing more powerful than fire. Oh boy, what chapter in your book were you most excited to write about? Boy, that's a good question. There's a couple I'll tell you about. Let me just finish this part. So they get at this argument about what's more powerful, fire or Abraham's God. Abraham says his God is more powerful. So Nimrod throws him in a furnace to burn him up. 3 days later, he's walking around. The angels have taken care of him. He walks out. Again, this is a story you read elsewhere in the Bible. Similar story anyway. And so Nimrod, he's amazed. So he bows down to Abraham. Abraham says, don't bow to me. I had nothing to do with it. God did it. However, this is interesting. However, some people say, well, it was magic. One of our magicians made the fire not hurt you. Well, one of the main magicians in Ur was Abraham's brother Haran. And so they asked Haran, Haran's there, and they asked Haran, was it magic or was it Abraham's God? Haran doesn't know what to say, but since Abraham has survived, he says, oh, I think it's Abraham's God. Nimrod says, throw him in the furnace. They throw him in and he burns to death. Now, the reason I bring that up, Genesis tells us that Haran has died even before his father Terah died. So Haran dies at a pretty young age. And Haran has, as children, he has Lot, he has Sarah, and Milcah. Lot, as you probably well know, Lot ends up going with Abraham to Haran and to all these other places. It's a very tight relationship. You always wonder, why did Abraham seem to take so much care and concern over Lot? That explains a lot. That if because of Abraham's belief, his father Haran died, Abraham would feel a duty to watch out for him. So even though he survives this, he's still in opposition to Nimrod. He's still not safe. So Terah eventually brings the family to Haran. They live there. And then when Terah dies, this is when Abraham leaves Mesopotamia forever. So that's part of what I write in. So let's see. What chapter in your book were you most excited to write? Boy, that's a good question. This chapter I was interested in writing because it's this backstory prequel. Took a lot of research to do it. Boy, there's so many good places. Well, I'm going to talk Wednesday about another thing. Probably the thing I look forward to writing about, which is my belief that anybody that thinks that God told Abraham to sacrifice his son was a good thing, or that God would even do that, I can't see how you could believe you believe the Bible or believe what God stands for. So I would look forward to writing that to put on the table an alternative idea about that whole situation. So I got some time here. So the other thing I want to look at is some of the archaeological information on what these places look like. So back in the 20s, this is the one. Let me see if I got the right one here. Oh, here we go. So back in the 1920s, a guy named Charles Woolley did archaeological research in the area. What they were pretty sure was Ur. The first thing they found was these gigantic temples. They were like 60 yards wide, 100 yards deep. They had all kinds of details. They found all this. So the other thing they found, he did further research and found what were like regular houses of regular people. But look how good these are. So he just, let's see. So the author of this all comes from the Bible. The Bible is history. The author points out that back in Babylon in 600 BC, common structures consisted of simple mud brick structures, 1 story high, with only 3 or 4 rooms. But 1,500 years before, which is the time of Ur, the city of Ur's natives were living in 2-story villas with 13 to 14 rooms. Keller describes a typical Ur home. A visitor would first encounter a small entrance hall with a basin in which to wash up. Then he walked into an inner court from which could be accessed a reception room kitchen, living rooms, even private rooms. This house would even have a private chapel for the local god. They could then walk up a stone staircase, along which was located a concealed lavatory, to the second floor gallery. This held all the family and guest bedrooms. The lower floor was made of burnt brick, the upper floor of mud brick. The walls were covered with plaster and even whitewashed. So that's what Ur looked like. Haran, where they met, Haran was part of, whoa, good. Another good question. Let me just finish this part. I'll get back to that. Haran was in an area known as Mary, and they had similarly big things with thousands of clay tablets, which explained all the things. Some of the clay tablets actually mentioned some of the patriarchs as people living in cities named after them. What's interesting is then you look at the archaeological evidence for Canaan. Canaan towns were fortresses, places of refuge and danger. Towering perimeter walls built of these great boulders invariably close a small area, not much bigger than St. Peter's Square in Rome. Each of these town forts had a water supply, but they were not towns in which a large population could be made permanent. The buildings were only small structures, only a few small rooms. The area inside usually only extended a few acres. So what's interesting is that we see that Abraham moves from a pretty civilized, well-built, fairly luxurious city experience to one where it's small. And in fact, he doesn't tend to live in those kinds of small towns. He's living in tents in a fairly desolate living area. So let's see, we have a question. What story in Genesis do you think captures the most similarity in modern society? Boy, well, I think most of the Genesis feels very contemporary. We've got kids that don't get along. We have, well, like Jacob goes to, he's basically running for his life. So he goes to Laban, who's Rebekah's brother. But guess what? He comes with nothing. He wants to marry one of the daughters. Well, they make him work for 7 years to do it. Things like that seem pretty modern, actually. What else do we have? Boy, let's see. Well, let's see. We got Abraham he has no clout. He's going to places where he goes to the Pharaoh. He goes to a king. His wife is beautiful. He lives in fear that, well, he's not anybody important. They could just kill him and take her. So he tells, twice he does this. He tells Sarah to say, tell them I'm your brother. I'm not really your husband. I'm your brother. And it's only God that bails him out of the situation, because God comes to these people and makes them realize that that's not the situation. And because we see how God tends to protect Abraham, and because of that, Abraham has success, even the people who are important don't want to mess with Abraham. The Pharaoh could have just go ahead and killed him, but Pharaoh's, I think, realized the power of God, and instead he just throws him out. Same with Abimelech. Abimelech can see this power. Let's see what else we have. This discussion is so insightful. And frankly, not an avid religious leader. Well, you don't have to be. Yeah, you don't have to be. Well, what I tell people is this book I try to do it without religion, but I absolutely believe in God. So if you're agnostic or an atheist, I don't think you're getting much out of this. But if you believe in God, I think you'll appreciate how being faithful is not simple. in Genesis shows us how some people can hang on to a faith and some people can lose it. And they show people living very human lives. There's so much human passions, oh my goodness, there's so many silly. The one that really kills me is 5 more minutes. Okay. The one that really kills me is when Jacob is living with Laban. He's got 2 wives now, and they're always fighting over him. Well, at one point, Leah's oldest son, Reuben, finds some mandrakes. He brings them back. They're apparently quite a delicacy. Well, Rachel has a fit. Oh my God. You got to give me some of these mandrakes. Leah says, you stole my husband. Now you want my mandrakes? No deal. You can have them if I can sleep with them. So she trades her mandrakes for the right to sleep with Jacob. And oh, by the way, she has some more children, which she hadn't been able to have before. She's already had 4. Now she has 2 more, all because of these mandrakes. Genesis is full of little details like that. It's such a great book. So let's see. I'm supposed to wrap up here. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Wednesday, I'm going to talk about my version of how there's no way God would ever ask a man to sacrifice his son. So I'm going to disabuse of that and give you some reasons in Genesis why I think Sarah agreed with me. And I'm going to talk about the great love story between Isaac and Rebecca. It's wonderful. It should be a Hallmark movie. Thursday, I'm going to talk about Judah and Tamar, which is not only exciting, but really dramatic. It's one of the most dramatic stories in the Bible, and it's important going forward. And Friday, I'm going to talk about the 3 outsiders that show us how mercy can heal broken relationships and families. So I'm the author of In the Beginning, Considerations Genesis. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and my publisher, Zulon Press. It's $19.99. You can get it as an ebook for $9.99. If you go on Amazon, you can look at the ebook and read parts of it to get a sense of whether you'd really like it or not. As I say, if any religion should like this book, Abraham goes back to all the great religions. So it's wonderful listening to you. Thank you. Appreciate that. I only found the chats Friday. I've been looking forward to getting back to people. This is by my first chance to talk to people about my books. I'm having a great time. So with that, thanks for the opportunity. Curious if you thought of a target. The target is probably church people, but I think the target office is maybe larger, but essentially church people would be the main target. And that's part of why I had Zulon, because they're a Christian publisher. Anyway, thanks for your attention. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and I'm going to say goodbye. Take care.